Hello, my name is Scott, and I didn't think The Last Jedi was all that. Now look, I know, and I'm sorry, and it sounds as painful to say as it is to hear, but look, we're going to be getting Star Wars films every year for the rest of time, so it's worth pointing out when certain elements just don't land. Hopefully, this will result in better films somewhere down the line. Now at this stage, I'm fresh from the midnight screening, I've seen the mixed to positive reviews, and I agree that there are some phenomenal moments in The Last Jedi, but there are also a ton of really crucial issues that, for me at least, really stood out. I don't imagine I'm alone in this, and well, we'll definitely find out in the comments, but I'm Scott from Whatculture.com, and these are 10 major blunders the fans can't ignore in Star Wars The Last Jedi. Oh, and of course, major spoilers ahead. Number 10, Luke considering killing a sleeping Kylo betrays his entire character. So look, you've got Luke Skywalker, the guy who, against the words of an entire galaxy of people telling him that Darth Vader was an irredeemable monster, is insistent that there is actually good in him. I mean, sure, Luke, whatever. Look, you just try and get that off the ground. I'm sure it's gonna... Oh, it worked. There was good in Vader after all. With that in mind, why the hell do we have an older Luke straight up thinking that the solution to Kylo's turn to the dark side was to murder him in his sleep? Even if this is some sort of reference or rhyme to episode 3 and Anakin butchering the younglings, which is one of the worst scenes in cinema history by the way, it's completely out of character. Fundamentally, Luke is the guy that sees the light where there is none. Even considering killing Kylo kind of betrays his entire arc across all those original films. And though they play it off as like, well, Luke eventually realized that he was full of regret and he only thought it for a second, the very fact that he actually considered killing the guy is just a step too far. Number 9, Admiral Holdo not telling Poe what she was up to. Can someone, anyone out there, explain what the flying Admiral Holdo's plan actually was? First up, she's appointed to command after Leia's taken a little trip into space, more on that later, and then proceeds to spend the entire film flitting between good deeds and being a control freak. Is she perhaps a mole for the First Order, or just full of herself? We're definitely supposed to dislike her because she's up against Poe for the duration of the movie. Though in the end, we find out her plan all along was to let the escape shuttles leave and jet off down to Crate. So why all the waiting? And more importantly, why didn't she just tell Poe this? The entire mission that Poe, Finn, and Rose all go on is because of a lack of information. Something that could have easily been prevented if Holdo wasn't so pointlessly cagey. Instead, it feels like it was only put there to manufacture a threat that ultimately, in the end, didn't even need to be there. Number 8, all the marketing being deceptive as hell. From the reveal of the red fonts to all manner of trailers making it seem like The Last Jedi was going to be an in-depth exploration of what it means to grow old with the Force, the reality of the film is stuffed full of tonal inconsistencies and forced humor. Every time Kylo and Rey start talking to each other, which is one of the movie's best assets, it gets cut off with a terrible mistimed joke. It's very Marvel humor style. It feels like Disney almost mandated this sort of signature trait where they decide to just stop a scene and address it head on. Rey's whole scene where she's training with Luke for the first time and he asks her to reach out and she literally just reaches out with her hand. It's completely indicative of this sort of thing and it's just lazy. Go back to those trailers now and you'll see a completely different movie. It really sells a sort of tone and weight that sadly just isn't present, and that's a huge missed opportunity. Number 7, the timeline inconsistencies. Now we know that episode 8 takes place directly after the end of episode 7. However, when we start stitching the scenes together from the end of The Force Awakens, something like even where Rey is standing doesn't actually line up. Instead, going beat for beat from the end of The Force Awakens to now, we see her standing on one side of the island with an arm outstretched, only to then walk forward to Luke and hold the arm out again. That was just weird. Match this up with where General Hux is and it makes even less sense. The last time we saw him was during the destruction of Starkiller Base. He was being told to evacuate and go back to see Supreme Leader Snoke alongside Kylo. Kylo's mandate was to return to Snoke for further training, although we never actually see any of this happen. And although the assumption was that Hux would then go back for more orders, he's then aboard a vessel firing down on another rebel base. It's a minor gripe, but it's something that sticks out immediately from the beginning of the film. Number 6, Rose almost dooms the rebellion to save Finn for no reason. So we're building up to the end of the movie, where during the big fight on Crate, and Finn sees that there's one opportunity to take out one of the First Order's most crucial weapons. He eyes up the battering ram cannon, which is a terrible name, and decides to peg it full speed into the center of the device. Taking his communicator off, he's going to do a full-on suicide run, taking himself out and crippling the First Order forevermore. The music swells, Finn himself seems extremely determined to see this through, and to be honest, his arc is pretty much done. We can totally see Finn sacrifice himself to turn the tide against the First Order. Only then is the moment that Rose makes the save. And I say save as a quote-unquote because Finn did not need to be saved. Rose sideswipes Finn's vehicle and sends it careening off to the side. But why? Mainly because she has a crush on the guy or she sees a future with him? Is their relationship together more important than trying to turn the tide of the war? The worst thing about this scene is that the cannon still goes off and blows up the door behind them. Yet in the moment, we're still with Finn and Rose as it's supposed to be a romantic moment. As far as Rose is aware, all of those rebels just died so that she can have a little peck on the cheek from Finn. Don't get me wrong, it would have been cool if the two of them hooked up, but to do it in this way with such wider ramifications to the war itself, it felt misguided and distracting and again, mostly pointless. Number 5, Luke tossing his lightsaber away like it was nothing. So this happens right at the beginning of the film, and although we spent 2 years trying to guess what the hell Luke's first words were going to be, the reality was Rian Johnson telling Mark Hamill to, hey, just toss the lightsaber over your shoulder. Who cares about all the fan theories and all the potentially momentous, memorable quotes that could come from that scene? Furthermore, this kind of feels like it ties in thematically with what Kylo talks about letting the past die and moving on, which is a fine thing to do. It is worthwhile having forward momentum to your movie, but all the same, how much would it have hurt to just give us a really cool moment? I mean, we've been looking forward to it since the end of The Force Awakens, and the reality was a YouTube skit. Number 4, the Kanto Bite casino chase. Now this thing just felt like it was from a completely different movie. I guess they decided that they wanted to have some sort of big chase scene to please the kids. Regardless, the reality of the scene was Finn and Rose riding some sort of weird, over-the-top, Last Guardian Trico looking thing and flying across Kanto Bite. It was simply unnecessary. It went on way too long. The whole thing was entirely CG, and not for a second did you believe that Finn or Rose were in any danger whatsoever. Number 3, Rey's training literally being 2 scenes. This was one of the most fundamental errors in the movie. The passage of time between Rey and Luke. In Empire Strikes Back, we're seeing quite a confident progression of Luke when he's training with Yoda. We see him go from lifting rocks to doing upside down handstands, forward flips to controlling the Force and asking questions. It's a real training montage and a set of scenes that sets him up to be a Jedi Master, something that Rey never does with Luke. Instead, the way it comes across in The Last Jedi is literally 2 scenes. One where Rey is sitting on the end of a plinth being told to reach out and search her feelings, and another where she's training with her bow staff and then changes to a lightsaber. Apparently this is all that's needed to then shift an entire pile of rocks or hold herself differently or start being referred to as a Jedi. Luke even says during his death scene that he is not the last Jedi and instead we're passing it on to Rey. Yet I get the feeling that as far as the movie's concerned, her training is already complete. Sadly, for as much as the trailers and behind the scenes images hyped up the relationship between Luke and Rey, the reality is literally moments of screen time together. Number 2, Captain Phasma gets cheated again. Why even get Gwendolyn Christie to be one of your main bad guys if you're not going to do something with her? One of the biggest mistakes and most talked about qualms with The Force Awakens was just how underused Captain Phasma was, despite her awesome, immediately iconic look. Once again, in The Last Jedi, she pops up at the end for literally what must be 2 minutes of screen time. She fights Finn for only a few seconds, gets clocked in the face, and then falls to her potential doom. Because we don't see her die, yet again, she could get brought back, but considering how many complaints were made towards The Force Awakens and the misuse of Phasma, how hard would it have been to give her a much larger role? Number 1, flying Leia. Now, I can barely say that with a straight face, but to be honest, there are 2 aspects to this. 1, it is definitely cool to see Leia actually use the Force on screen. We've heard about this in some of the extended comics, and it's one of those things that fans have looked forward to and speculated on ever since she heard Luke's call at the end of Empire Strikes Back. However, after some really touching music and an initial slow build to what she's actually going to do, the camera zooms way out and she just flies back to the ship. Honestly, the whole thing looks so weird. It was very Mary Poppins, very awkward CG. Why not have the explosion that drags Leia out to space put her in the coma in the first place and we didn't have to even have this scene? Let me know in the comments whether you enjoyed the flying Leia thing or whether you think it sticks out just as much as I did. And that's my list. Let me know down below what you think. Obviously, the comments are going to be all over the place, but I've been Scott from Whatculture.com, and I'll catch you soon.